Admiral Bergraaf, what do you see as the main maritime security challenges at the moment?
Well, obviously the piracy is a huge problem, but it's not the only one. We also face challenges in trafficking at sea. That could be both weapons, drugs, persons, human trafficking, but also actually trafficking of weapons of mass destruction. So there are a lot of things that we have to focus at.
Do you think there's too much attention given to piracy at the moment?
Not really, because it is important. It's basically, as I see it, it's more an attack on commercial interests than on national security. But it shows actually the vulnerability of the sea lines of communication, and that could be exploited by others for other means, even if the piracy is basically a commercial thing, where the pirates do what they do in order to get money for it. But there's a need for the alliance, I think, to portray credibility in our ability to defend the sea lines of communication.
Do you feel that naval forces are sufficiently equipped, both in equipment and training, for the new challenges?
Well, naval forces, maritime forces, are by nature very flexible, and they are international also by definition. So they're used to adapt quickly. They're used to cooperate, and I think actually they are relatively well equipped for the task that they are doing right now. Even though if they are constructed to operate in the upper part of the conflict spectrum, warfighting at sea, whereas the challenge that we see now is mainly in the lower end of the spectrum. But these forces can do both. The challenge is that, of course, using high-quality platforms like frigates and destroyers designed for hunting submarines or aircraft are expensive platforms and not optimized to look for these kind of small pirate vessels.
You talk about the hardware there, which may not be the best hardware for these situations. What about the training as well?
Well, the hardware, I would not say that the hardware is not the best, but it's expensive.
But it's not, it wasn't designed for this purpose.
It wasn't designed specifically for this, and we could probably, use also cheaper platforms for these kind of operations. But we need to be able to carry out missions in the whole spectrum of the alliance missions, and that's why we still need these high-tech and high-quality platforms. On the training side, I think the training is quite good. They're well trained for this. They're well qualified for it. We have maritime interdiction forces. We have people specializing in this, and I think actually that is quite good. But it's important that we maintain it, that we maintain our ability to do these things. At the same time, of course, we cannot, as I indicated, we cannot only focus on the counter-piracy. We need to be able to do all these kind of missions, and that's actually taking it back to the challenges. Even though if piracy is the one that is in focus now, we see that weapons are being sold and proliferated to states in different parts of the world, and some of these are not always the most stable states in the world. So we cannot exclude that the alliance will be challenged at sea with capacities in areas where we used to be dominant.
Do you feel that there's also a possibility of a blurring of the lines of what the naval forces do? And I'm talking in relation to some of the things that they're coming up against have largely been in the police, the national police remits now.
Absolutely, and this is one of the things that NATO is working on to fix. This is different in different nations. Sometimes it, as you indicated, would be a police thing left with the Ministry of the Interior, for instance. In other nations, it will be a part of the Ministry of Defense and the Navy. So there are blurring lines, and it has to be blurring lines in a way. If we are, from the military side, only focusing on military information, we would not have the whole picture. Maritime operations is very, very much about knowing what is going on in an area, to collect all kinds of information to have the best situational awareness possible, and then also to share that with the other actors, such as the police, customs, harbor authorities, search and rescue authorities, and so on, But we need comprehensive situational awareness in order to carry out our tasks. So what we are doing now in NATO is that we are working on two major papers. One is the Alliance Maritime Strategy, which will lay out the entire strategy for maritime operations for the Alliance that is currently being staffed here. And another one is the Maritime Security Operations Concept. And what it's doing is trying to sort out and clarify who's doing what in these blurring lines. And this is very important, actually. Another blurring line is the legal aspects, which is also different in different nations.
Do you feel that current operations against some of these challenges are too fragmented?
There are different views on should this be a thing for NATO, should this primarily be a thing for the European Union, or should it be a kind of coalition of the willing? And we see all these kind of groups operating in the Gulf of Aden and Horn of Africa.
How important do you feel that current defence budget cuts are in shaping the response to these challenges?
On the budget thing, I think obviously the reduced defence budgets in all areas of defence, not only the maritime, requires nations to work much more closely together, to share our experiences, to operate together in the theater, at sea, or in the field. But not only that, actually, we need to cooperate a lot more on producing those available forces, which is not only buying the hardware at the shipyards or in the weapons factories. So not only the procurement side of it, but the entire thing of producing available forces, which is, the training, maintaining competence, command and control capacities, exercises. All these things are areas where we need to cooperate. If you take a normal European nation, they would have 4 or 5 frigates and a handful of submarines or something like that. And if you operate that only as a nation, it's a kind of critical mass thing. So which reduces actually the usability. So if we would be able to work a lot more together in producing these forces, this would gain a lot for the alliance. We would be able to maintain a much larger output, much better usability of those forces. And I think this is for all kind of forces, not only maritime forces.
How important have these operations been in increasing interoperability?
I'm not quite sure if I can see this particularly in the maritime area, but I think over the last year there's an increased number of nations who really see the problem and the challenge of being at a critical mass. So there's no doubt that there's a much more focus now on this kind of multinational cooperation, and the Secretary General has proposed 3 areas to work more multinational.
Do you feel that these operations bring together different countries, not just in operations, but also in bringing them into the same kind of culture?
Yes, it does. It's quite interesting, actually. On the maritime side, on the maritime domain, I think that has been the area traditionally where we have had interoperability, or the best interoperability all the time. So we're not bad. We're not in a bad situation, but we need to maintain this this move towards better interoperability. And this is important also in order to, of course, to share the information and to have the same situational awareness, which means that it's not only about plugging in the hose for refueling at sea or talking on a radio, but it's protocols for link systems, for automated systems, but it's also down to things like doctrine and the way we work, and we need to work on this all the time.
Helmut Graf, thank you very much.